The views and content expressed on the following program are provided solely for informational and entertainment purposes. They do not constitute legal advice. A podcast is not a substitute for retaining a competent, licensed attorney to advise you on your specific legal situation. How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the show. It is time for Break the Business, where we empower indie creators and have some fun along the way. I'm Ryan Kairalla, and it is a pleasure to have you here this week. And it is a pleasure to be joined by my co-host this week, Zach Sloan. How's it going, Zach?
What's up, Ryan? I am doing well out here in a slightly overcast Colorado, which is fine because you're in hot Miami.
It is hot. I don't like this time of year. This is it's the beginning of just what becomes a very unpleasant 4 months in Miami. And I know, I'm getting people playing little tiny violins for me across the country, throughout this great nation of ours, because for 8 months out of the year, Miami is a spectacular place to live. But May, June, July, August, it is a humidity-soaked, mercury-rising hellscape from which we do not recover until like the new school year starts. And it's brutal, but we're going to bear with it. And, unlike my air conditioner, we're going to handle it just fine. And I'm feeling pretty cool right now because I'm hanging out with you, Zach. And I know this is a silly thing to say, but the music that was playing before we came on, that pre-show music, the public domain YouTube music, it slaps this week.
Hey, that was pretty dope. I was just sort of grooving to it. I was like, I could envision myself like just having this on while I'm doing things. That was actually really cool.
We were bopping to the public domain music. I saw you in the window. I saw Lauren, our producer, in the window. We were all digging on that music hard. And this is my favorite time of year for music. I'm doing nothing but digging on music lately because my favorite day of the year happened on Saturday. I talked about this last week, and now it's finally came to existence. Eurovision happened on Saturday. I watched it. It was exquisite. So many great songs, banger after banger. Did you happen to catch any of this, Zach? I know a lot of the Americans still aren't into it yet.
I am very much aware of Eurovision. I have yet to watch it.
All right. So, yeah, go ahead.
I'm gonna need the hard sell though, because just hit me up. Like, tell me why I should care.
I'm ready for this, man, because I gave our dear friend Katie Zaccardi last week this same speech, and I'm telling you, like, America is sleeping on Eurovision. This is a tremendous spectacle. If you like music, if you like anything competitive, if you like ostentatious costumes and just over-the-top theatrics, Eurovision's got it all. It is just an exquisite production start to finish. And unlike a lot of kind of these productions where, I don't really want to watch it because it's going to be like one song and then like 20 minutes of speeches and then 30 minutes of commercials and then another song, that kind of flow. That's not Eurovision. Eurovision is just 26 songs. Each country gives you one back to back to back to back to back. No interruptions, just the music. And it is absolutely fantastic.
See, now that sounds interesting to me. Because the idea in my head, it was always more of had an awards show feel, which sounds like this is just a concert conducted by many different acts. Sounds more fun.
And if you're a fan of multi-genres, like if you want to sort of see everything, like that's what Eurovision gives you. You get a band like Iceland, which comes out with like 360-degree circle keytars and plays like just kooky new wave stuff. And then right up next to them is Finland that gives you just the craziest death metal. And then Cyprus leads the show off with like a Lady Gaga style pop song. You get it all. And every single song was amazing, except for the United Kingdom. They did not bring it this year. No hate to the UK, but I believe they were the first country in like 10 years to not get a single point from any of the country judges or any of the voters on Eurovision. They got a complete goose egg, which I didn't even know was mathematically feasible. And I don't understand why the UK is bad at Eurovision. Like, how is it that a country that brings us the Beatles and is just the cradle of so much great art in this area can't churn out a competitive Eurovision entry, I'll never understand. You got to get into this, Zach. You and I, we're watching this next year. I'm going to put it on your calendar.
Is there a like fantasy football version of Eurovision where we can like draft countries and go at it in a setting like that?
I don't know, but there needs to be. Zach, that is a marvelous idea. I want to do this. I want to there's 26 countries that compete. You get together with, a dozen or so people. You get to each adopt like 2 or 3 countries, or you do it like a draft, right? Like fantasy football always is a draft, and you draft I want to do this. That sounds fantastic.
That is what I want to do. Having never, and I don't think it matters that I've never seen it before. I will pick countries at random that sound cool. Like my first pick actually would have been Finland, because I know that they bring like death metal. Like
yes, they do.
They make American metal look just like kind of quiet.
God, Finland was incredible. They were all incredible. Yes, I'm into this idea, Zach. You've taken my favorite thing in music and have made it 1,000 times better. Thank you. Chef's kiss. Mwah. Love it.
Next year, everybody can tune in for the Break the Business Eurovision fantasy music challenge, or whatever you want to call it.
Yes!
You wordsmith that, but
I'm going to do it just like that. We'll create imaging for it. The Eurovision fantasy something or another. It'll be just, and we'll get all the Break the Business people into it. Oh, I got it. Perfect. That's wonderful. Thank you.
I love it.
I mean, and as if I wasn't in a good enough mood already, our guests coming up in the next segment, excited to talk to these two gentlemen, Arabian Prince and Paul Hershenson. Arabian Prince, you might know him as the one of the founding members of NWA. Paul Hershenson, a really prominent software developer and entrepreneur. They have come together to co-found Incubate Next, which is a social impact technology incubator focused on underserved entrepreneurs and communities. Can't wait to hear their story. And certainly Arabian Prince, with his history with NWA, like I'm sure he's got some great advice for artists about how to avoid bad deals in music, and I hope we can get some of that info out of him. You got a lot to look forward to with that. I'm excited to talk to them both.
Every time I come on as a co-host, I just get to talk to cooler and cooler people. Like I've spoken with Ariel. I started off my first episode with Ariel Hyatt, and now I get to chat with a founding member of NWA.
I don't know how you keep drawing the killer guests, man. This is fortuitous. Well, you know what it is I tell them Zach Sloan's coming on this week, and they're like, all right, you need to move me to that episode. I got to hang with Zach. And so now here they are.
I just like to think that my best ability is availability. So whenever you're like, would you like to host? I'm like, yes, I would.
That is a valuable characteristic, and we very much appreciate having you. I got to tell you, Zach, the other reason why I bring up Eurovision is because I think a lot about what allows Eurovision to thrive in this amazing creative culture that exists throughout Europe, and all these different genres that flourish there, and how in a lot of ways, though not perfect, a lot of European countries really do a good job of incubating and the next generation of great independent musicians. There's a lot of policies and infrastructure there to help these creators thrive. And it reminds me of what we have here in the United States, and an article that Lee Jin wrote in Every recently that talks about the American safety net and the extent to which it is not as hospitable as it could be to cultivating independent creators in the same way that we see in Europe. And I'll tell you this, Zach, something that I want to kind of bring up here is a little confession. Something that I think this podcast needs to get better at is, for 5 years since I've been hosting this show, Zach, I've often tried to speak about policies that I think would make things better for indie artists. And because my background is in copyright law, I often try to talk to artists about copyright legislation that's coming up. I talked a lot about the Music Modernization Act on this show. I talked a lot about the CASE Act on this show. These were various copyright acts that came out because I said these were going to help indie musicians. And I think I've erred in that respect because, yes, copyright laws do help indie musicians on the margins, but we're talking about little pennies. But when we think about policies that would actually move the needle for indie musicians and indie creators of all stripes, we need to talk about safety net type policies, not copyright, which is important, but the real stuff that moves the needle, like healthcare, social welfare policies, making taxation better for independent contractors, creating universal basic income, universal creator income, so that we have a safety net and a foundation for creative workers to thrive. Because as this article talks about, Zach, and we can get into it, but first I want to get some of your initial thoughts on this subject, is because our country is not an easy place to be an independent contractor because of all the things that we can talk about here, it makes it an inherently difficult place to be an independent creator. And thus, all the art around us suffers. Think of all the great indie creators out there who aren't able to flourish as much as they could in this country because we don't have a legal structure that supports them, and so they have to go find a 9-to-5 job. That's not the kind of creator economy that we should be having.
Well, I mean, we're getting at as the heart of, and don't get me wrong, I love my day job. I'm an elementary school teacher by day now, but for a couple of years I was a musician full time. And the thing that my wife and I really had to look at and say is, can we afford health insurance on my musician in Colorado income? And the answer was barely. And if we wanted to have children, no. And so a huge part of the reason that I left my full-time music life and went back to the 9-to-5 is exactly what we're talking about. Is the health insurance just becomes crippling at some point. I don't know if I'm well versed enough in universal basic income to make a grand statement there, but I can tell you I have made the decision for my career based on the health insurance problem.
And that's, to me, of the things that Lee Jin brings up in this article, that's the biggest one, is the fact that there are a lot of things that are necessary to live in American society and to survive in American society that are inexorably tied to 9-to-5 employment in a way that they're not in other countries. In other countries, in a lot of Western countries, healthcare is a right. Healthcare is something that everybody has. It is tied to existence and citizenship, not to employment. And so if you're an independent creator, you can feel more freedom to go out and create because you know that you won't lose your healthcare in the process. In America, we largely tie healthcare to employment. And so we end up with a lot of folks like you, Zach, who find it more difficult to make a go of full-time indie creation because you can't do that unless you can solve the healthcare problem, unless you can find a level of success to be able to buy your own private health insurance on the open market. And even with some of the government programs that exist in the Affordable Care Act, which try to narrow that gap a little bit, from what you're telling me, especially if you have a kid or a larger family, there's still not enough to bridge the gap there.
Oh, not even. And another thing that you pointed out there was to help make the tax structure better for contractors, right? And especially when we're talking about like independent contractors and things like that. For some of the listeners who don't know, I also have an employment law background. Most of my legal experience is in child abuse. That sounds terrible when you put it that way. But I also spent some time in.
We know what you mean.
Law.
Don't worry.
Yeah, I know it's. But I also spent time in employment law, and a lot of issues that I would deal with were, can somebody be classified as an independent contractor? Because if so, it's really, really beneficial for the businesses, but it's also can be really, really problematic for the individual, right? Because they lose those things that employees want and need, and if you want to be an indie artist, it's a must-have to have health insurance and things like that. So I think you've brought up a couple of very interesting points, Ryan.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought up this idea of being an independent contractor because another thing that Lee Jin brings up in the article, which is about the tax treatment of independent contractors. So if you are an independent contractor musician, unless you have an accountant who can do some creative stuff like setting up an S Corp for you and having some of your income be W-2 income and all that, for the most part, you are employing yourself as a self-employed musician, which means you're paying both halves of your payroll taxes. And so you are effectively paying a higher tax rate for being an independent contractor musician than you would as a 9-to-5 worker. That's just another situation where, intentionally or not, the American legal structure is making it inhospitable to be an indie creator. Lee Jin had a great quote from this article that I think just summarizes the whole kind of issue for indie creators because she's really brilliant. And of course, she can say in 100 words, which takes me 1,000. But this is from the article. Specifically, policies around employment and social welfare make life precarious for creators in the United States, in contrast to the conditions creators and freelance workers experience in other high GDP nations. With no fixed paycheck coming in every month and a career that hinges on ever-changing algorithms and viral trends, becoming a full-time creator means foregoing safety for the ability to pursue your dream. And so when you talk about not having the health and, not having guaranteed health insurance, having disadvantageous tax structures, not having a significant retirement safety net for all citizens. And even not having some of the stuff they have in countries like France, which not only have a lot of this basic safety net stuff, but also actively incentivize creative work with government programs, with grants, with government programs that help promote your music out into the world, and universal creative income programs. This stuff is really critical, and I think as a program, if we're not fighting for these things and not advocating for these things in the same breath that we advocate for things like, the Music Modernization Act, that's going to help copyright, artists get a few extra pennies, or the Copyright Royalty Board is going to negotiate slightly higher royalty rates for indie creators. If we're not advocating for the former as much as we're advocating for the latter, and if not more so, then I feel like we're not doing what we should be doing on this program.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's very easy, with my legal, much less legal expertise than you in entertainment law, it's fun to talk about the big sexy topics, right? But these nitty gritty nuts and bolts things are what make the industry viable for some and not the others. And so I think this article is exceptional. And when I first read it, it was something that I was kind of embarrassed I'd never really thought about, because it was hitting on a lot of the issues that drove me out of the industry.
Yeah. And I think ultimately the country as a whole suffers. I just think of how many artists are we missing out on, and how much great work are we missing out on because these creators out there don't have a foundation that they can build off of and feel a safety net to make creation a low risk activity. And until that gets addressed, I feel like creativity in this country is either the province of the wealthy, and certainly we have no shortage of music stars out there who are the children of millionaires. And there's a reason for that, because they have that foundation. Or it's often the activity of the very, very poor who just don't have any other opportunities. And so they might as well go for this because they don't have, there's no opportunity cost for something else, because we do. Ironically, this country does such a poor job taking care of people that for the very, very poor, music, the lottery ticket that is being an indie creator might be your best option. And, we need to make it something that works for everybody.
Oh, absolutely. And I think something that really stuck out from that quote that you read about was being at the whim of the algorithm, right? How many YouTube, like indie YouTube artists have I, or semi quasi stars, or whatever, however you want to say it, have done well, and then all of a sudden something changes and then they're just gone. And these are people who oftentimes, may have quit their jobs. I was lucky because I relied on live shows. I wasn't subject to the algorithm, but I would have been hosed come COVID, and having some other ways to help these indie artists be safe and secure through the ups and downs that is a music career is essential. And I think if we really want to take the arts seriously in America, we need to address these things.
Without a doubt. Before we bring on Arabian Prince and Paul Hershenson from Incubate next, I'm so excited to talk to these guys because I bet they have a lot of perspective on this very topic, considering how long they've been in the industry. I did see this article in Billboard that caught my eye. Zach, do you remember? I mean, I'm sure you do. This band was just ubiquitous for all of us. A band in like the 2000s called The Calling.
Oh, you mean one of the 70 bands in the 2000s that started with the word "the"? Yes, I remember.
Yeah, they had the song "Wherever You Will Go." It was probably perpetually on everybody's iPod. It was probably pre-downloaded on your iPods when you bought it because of how everywhere it was. My only memory of The Calling was I saw them live once at the Y100 Jingle Ball in Miami. I must have been like a freshman in high school or something. And The Calling would let off the show as one of those shows where like a bunch of different artists like that were popular with radio, in top 40 radio, all came to town at the same time and played in some basketball arena. And The Calling let off the show. And I don't think they were happy that they got the opening gig, right? Like that somebody told The Calling, look, The Calling, you're good, but you're not Shakira good, Pink good, Jewel good. So you have to open. And I don't think they liked that very much, because all I remember was they got up on stage, played 3 songs, and then just completely trashed this like beautiful Christmas themed set that they had on the stage. Like there was this big, beautiful giant snowman and candy canes, and they just freaking laid waste to all of it, as any, a self-respecting hard rock band should. But it just, yeah, that's the only thing I think of when I think of The Calling, other than Wherever You Will Go. But the reason why they're back in my mind now and back in America's consciousness now is this story in Billboard that was basically just a where are they now with The Calling. And of course I'm going to click that because I'm like, I would like to know where The Calling is now. And the story is actually a pretty good cautionary tale for artists. I mean, first of all, it's worth mentioning that Alex Band, the lead singer of The Calling, has been through some things lately. It's pretty wild. I believe he had a Parkinson's diagnosis, if I have that right, and he was kidnapped at some point, like after a gig or something. So, dude's lived. But the piece of the article that I thought was, particularly intriguing to the work I do in entertainment law was that he's over the years, had some copyright disputes with his bandmate. Because really The Calling, I didn't know this, is actually just two people, and the rest of the band was just session musicians. Yeah, I didn't know that. But basically, the two members of The Calling have been spending the better part of 2 decades fighting over the ownership of the band's name. And that got me back to a piece of advice I'm always imparting to indie creators who collaborate on anything, whether you are making a band together, whether you're making YouTube videos together. If you're doing anything together and there is a name involved, you need to have what we call in music a band agreement, but some kind of agreement that you have between those two collaborators. And among the things that are going to be addressed in that agreement, in addition to how the money is going to be split, how are decisions made, how many votes does everybody have, a big one is who owns the name and who gets to take the name when everything is over. And do neither of you take the name? Does one of you take the name? How is that? Does both of you get the name? Because if you don't figure out those things on the early side, you end up with what The Calling has now, which is just a big mess over trying to figure out who owns this very valuable name and who can use it at concerts. And of course, like the entertainment law nerd in me, thinks that's the most fascinating thing about this story, right? Not the fact that he was kidnapped, but this like nerdy piece of trademark law. But I mean, it's an important cautionary tale for artists. I'm always trying to get artists who collaborate with others to do band agreements, to agree on things at the beginning, while things are still good between you and your bandmate, while things are still pleasant, before money gets involved and complicates everything. Agree on the things now so that you don't fight over them later when the stakes get higher.
Well, and you also don't want to get yourself backed into a corner. I remember reading Slash's autobiography, and he talked about how Axl Rose eventually got the name to Guns N' Roses. And it was, he walked into the room before the show in an arena and said, I want the name to Guns N' Roses. You guys sign this right now, or I'm not going on stage and there's going to be a riot. And so...
Whoa.
I mean, now this is according to, this is Slash's side of the tale, but I've heard it repeated several times. And yeah, and so they're like, okay, I guess it's not our band name anymore. And that's how Axl then goes on to spend 74 years making Chinese democracy. But that's not really what we're talking about. What we're talking about is that I tend to agree that have those things not tend to agree, I completely agree, have those things figured out ahead of time, just because it makes life so much easier on the back end, just if there's a question of who owns what or who can do what with what. Yeah.
And whenever I've drafted a band agreement for bands, that's usually section 1 of the agreement. It's one of the first things that's addressed. And it's surprising how a lot of bandmates don't think it's going to be an issue. But then when I ask the bandmates, how are we handling ownership of the band name and what happens if you guys break up? Suddenly, all the band members have a very different point of view of that. And they're going to fight and they're going to yell, but better they fight and yell now while they're still poor and early than fight later when they have access to powerful lawyers and there's a lot of money at stake. So better to have those arguments at step 1.
Dude, my band can't agree on a set list, let alone the name of the band. All right? That's why we're called the Zach Sloan Band. I made it very clear who owned the name.
Oh, God. It'd be really funny if your band broke up and like your bassist is like, hey, we're Zach Sloan Band. I'm Ted.
That would be awesome, actually. Yeah. Doug, I hope you're watching. Please don't do that.
Oh, it's a Doug and not a Ted. I was close. I just went with
you
like
were
the
close
most random
for having no idea. I'm kind of
name. Yeah. If it was Ted, that would have been hilarious.
That would be fun.
All right. Great stuff. Love to open with some good, scary, cautionary tales. And And just go back and listen to the Callings music, everybody. It'll take you back to a time, and it's still pretty terrific. It holds up, I assure you. All right, we're going to take a quick break. Arabian Prince and Paul Hershenson from Incubate next. Coming up next on Break the Business. Don't go anywhere. Ryan Kairalla here. I hope you're enjoying the show, and I hope that you're getting a lot out of it. I do what I do because I care about creators like you. A lot. I've dedicated my career to helping creative professionals, entrepreneurs, and organizations move forward. I do it by hosting this program, and I'm also proud to do it in my legal practice. If you're a creative professional looking for solutions-oriented legal services to help you further your goals, I'd love to help. My firm RKPA does contracts, commercial law, copyright, trademark, and more. Visit rkpalaw.com to learn more. That's rkpalaw.com. Ryan A. Kairalla, PA, Miami, Florida.
Streaming services for Break the Business provided by LEK Entertainment. LEK Entertainment is a full-service entertainment company offering everything from consultations to full-scale events and productions, including audio and video productions, voiceovers, staged theatrical productions, script and music development, and streaming services. For more information, visit lekentertainment.com. LEK Entertainment wants to help you bring your story to life.
Thanks for supporting Break the Business. If you have a question or topic that you want us to discuss, email us at breakthebusiness@gmail.com. You can follow the host, that's me, on Twitter at Ryan Kair, and you can follow the show at the BTB Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the show on Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook, and on all major podcast platforms. And now, let's get back to the show. Got a couple awesome guests coming up here now. They are the co-founders of Incubate Next, a social impact technology incubator that focuses on underserved entrepreneurs and community. We have with us Arabian Prince, a founding member of NWA, entrepreneur and technology consultant. We also have Paul Hershenson, who is the co-founder of the software development firm Art and Logic. You can find out more about their work by visiting incubatenext.com. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being on with us this week.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan.
This is a thrill among thrills to have you both as a fan of music and business entrepreneurship. You're hitting all the marks for Zach and I. This is awesome. Just to quickly introduce everybody, give them the background here. Arabian Prince, you're a founding member of NWA. Paul, you're a software innovator who got started developing music software. And so I'm curious about something. What got you two connected? Is it just sort of this shared interest in music that you both have, this shared musical history?
I'll let Paul start, and then I'll follow up after that.
All right, you want me to take that one? So it's probably a year and a half ago or so now. Arabian met our director of marketing for Art and Logic at a music technology conference, and they seemed to hit it off and had lunch together a couple of times. And then Carlos introduced me to Arabian, and we got to know each other and start talking, and found out that we had a lot in common and a lot of shared interests, particularly with startups and technology and entrepreneurship, and found there were a lot of ways to collaborate on different things, and ended up kind of through a circuitous path, ended up starting Incubate Next.
So let me sum it up in smaller words. Then COVID hit. COVID hit. That's what really. So COVID hit, and we were all talking and chatting and sitting around like, man, this is bad. This is real bad. Like, what can we do to help? So we got together and started this small little COVID company, built an app to help small businesses manage their employees. I mean, it's a lot more complicated than that, but we did that for a minute and just started looking at other ways to help. And I'm all about inner city community giving back. I know where I came from growing up in Compton and, becoming a technologist and a musician and artist and all of these things. But I really wanted to give people who didn't have the opportunities that some other people have to do, amazing things. So that's why we started Incubate Next, to really go and find people who don't get the opportunities and help them grow their IP, grow their new companies, and scale and whatever, from music and entertainment to, something we're working on right now is something called Mood Connect. So yeah, we're just looking to uplift in a sense.
And so that's what it means when you say that you guys are a social impact incubator. I assume that's sort of that kind of spirit that you just talked about there, Arabian, is what I would say probably separates you from a more traditional startup incubator, right?
Yeah, for sure. And what I understand is, like, I got lucky. As a young kid, I got lucky, made a song, got on the radio, and then we made more songs and got on the radio and we made more songs and Rock and Roll Hall of Fame way later. But it,
it was just like that.
Right,
in that order.
It just happened.
One after another.
But we understand that people need help, especially people in the inner cities and communities, people of color and women and, LGBTQ. And there's another one, I forget, but we really want to help. And I've got an amazing team, Paul and his team. And we've got, I always say AJ, and we got Matt. We got a great team of people that, we came together and created Voltron, and we try to do some amazing things.
So do you see this as a nonprofit type venture? Like, is this about just the social mission, or are you guys trying to get a return on investments too?
Paul?
No, we're trying to make money too. We're just trying to make money while doing some good in the world at the same time.
And that probably gets to the focus of your incubator. I know that a lot of the stuff that you guys are incubating is emphasizes like physical and mental health and wellness technology from what I read. I mean, I guess that was sort of intentional. If you're trying to make the world a better place, it's about not just focusing on underserved entrepreneurs and underserved communities, but also technologies and innovations that will have a positive impact.
Yeah, that's right. And one of our partners, Matt Walk, is a pharmacist and has a really deep expertise in health and wellness and FDA regulatory compliance and bringing pharmaceutical products to market. So having him in the mix, gives us kind of that extra dimension to be able to tackle that type of project, which is one reason why it's been a focus for us.
I can dig that. That's really exciting development for me. So where is your organization in terms of bringing in new projects? If there are folks out here watching or listening who might think that they have an innovation that you guys would want to sink your teeth into, are you openly looking for a new cohort? Where are things with that?
So we're busy working on two projects right now. But we would love for people, if they're interested in working on this, we would love for them to contact us now so that we can start the conversations and, kind of get them in the queue for when we're ready to take on new projects, which should be in a couple of months from now.
Yeah. And on top of that, one thing we want to make sure is, we all have friends and family and neighbors who have ideas, and they always want to tell you their ideas. And we have to really do the due diligence on what people bring to us. So if they can get it into us early, we can, either break some amazing news to them. It's like, oh, we think this is an amazing idea. We can help you. Or somebody already invented the tire and that one's not going to work.
That makes sense. So what stage of development are you all looking at? If somebody comes to you with just a really good idea, is that sufficient? Are you expecting a prototype, proof of concept, maybe an existing business? Where are you usually getting companies in what stage of development?
So we're focusing on people who are very early in the process. So what we say is we'll help take you from concept to seed. So if you have an idea, but you haven't had anything else, we're happy to talk with you. We'll probably try to talk you out of it to make sure that the idea is really something you care about. But it doesn't have to be anything more than an idea. Now, it certainly can be. We've been speaking with people who have already done a fair amount of work, but would benefit from the coaching and mentoring that we do. So if you're already VC backed, you don't need us. But if you're earlier than that and trying to raise your initial seed funding, then that's where we can help.
I have a question for each of you about particular aspects of your background that I found most intriguing. Paul, I want to start with you on this. You're known as sort of being a big supporter of remote work. I know that your company Art and Logic has encouraged that kind of work for a long time, and obviously with the pandemic, we've sort of been thrust into a involuntary remote work experiment throughout the country. And I can tell you in my own legal practice, before the pandemic, I was in an office at least 4 days a week, and now I'm at home 5 days a week, and I never want to go back. I'm so much better at what I do as an attorney and as a podcaster, having everything I need right in my home. And I think a lot of indie creators, because the venues closed during the pandemic, have learned to do their entire creative endeavor from home. Can you reflect a bit on where the country is right now in terms of remote work and where you see things going from here?
Well, it's been a very interesting experience for me. So we started working remotely from the very beginning at Art and Logic, and that's just about 31 years ago now. Back when we started, there was no infrastructure for remote work. Everybody thought we were completely out of our minds. Try to persuade a bank that they ought to loan you money when you don't have an office. And that was a challenge. So it's the changes have been pretty tremendous. It's been really interesting watching, in particular, the larger tech companies in Silicon Valley who have generally been pretty anti-remote work, be forced into doing a 180 on their policies. I think it's a wonderful development. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how long-lasting the changes to work in society are. I got to tell you, I feel a little bit like a fraud, though. I am an advocate of remote work, and I'm thrilled to see everybody having an opportunity to do it. But I've never had to work at home with teenage children and my wife at the same time. And now maybe I'm rethinking the whole thing. Except that fortunately, everybody's getting back to work. The kids are back on campus 2 days a week, and next year looks like it's going to be normal. But if it had lasted any longer, I would have found an office as fast as I could this summer. So
that's great, Zach.
And you know what? Before you go on, Ryan, I'm going to say something. Just wait for it, because before this is over, that door is going to open. I guarantee it.
It almost did. I heard him back there. So.
That's great, Zach. We have one of the most prominent advocates of remote work going back 3 decades. He comes on the show. He's like, I'm not so sold on it anymore.
I would normally give him a hard time, but my day job now, I'm a elementary school teacher, and I can understand how hard it is to get other things done when kids are around. So I feel you, man.
Yeah, if you've been teaching over Zoom for the last year, it's been a real challenge. It's been less than ideal. So.
Zach's definitely one of the real heroes in that regard. Arabian, I'd like to ask you a question here. For about 5 years now, we've been doing Break the Business as a podcast to help empower indie creators. It stems all the way back to a book I wrote in 2015, also called Break the Business, which is all about pointing out, as an entertainment lawyer, the dangers that exist in the music industry with record deals and management deals and things like that, and how we need to craft a better path for indie creators where they stay independent and they prevent themselves from being exploited. And I'd be remiss if I didn't get some perspective from you on that, Arabian, just from your experience with NWA. And, we all saw Straight Outta Compton. We know how a lot of that stuff went down. I'm sure it wasn't exactly the way it was portrayed in the movie, but there's plenty that could be read about what you guys went through. And I was wondering if you wouldn't mind, could you talk a little bit about just warnings that you could give to the artists out there? What would you tell artists today about getting involved with certain people in the music business and what they could do to protect themselves?
Yeah, so like Zach, I'm also a teacher. I teach, before COVID, I teach at Point Blank Music Academy. I'm the music business teacher. So I have rehearsed this answer over and over through class and class and class. Yes, so it's one of those things where the title of your thing is amazing, because the first thing I walk in my class and I say is, who in here wants to be famous? And some people raise their hands, some people don't. Then I ask, who in here wants to be successful? Everybody raises their hand. So I said, there's a stark difference between being successful and being famous, right? You can be famous and be broke and not successful and all of it. There's so many people out there that are. But to be successful, you have to take music or entertainment and break it down into its fundamental words. Music, business. Entertainment, business. People do the music, they do the entertainment, but they forget about the most important word. It's the business. So I try to get them to flip that in the first few classes. We don't even talk about music. We go into what's the copyright, what's publishing, what's your writers, what's your society, is it ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, all of these things, and explain to them You can have a hit record and not make any money if you don't take care of all of these things along the way. So I try to teach that to the really, really young, up and coming independent artists. And then the other thing I explained to them is, yeah, you can be on a major. I was on a major. We were on a major and we weren't making any money because we were getting ripped off. And then two, the calculations when you deal on a major label are really, really flipped. And I said, once I went independent, I'm like, okay, on a major, we sell 1 million records. We may make $100,000 off that 1 million records unless they start recouping even more money. And then, we might owe them. And I says, independently, I can sell 100,000 albums and make $1 million. Which do you want? What, like, figure it out. Do you want the fame? Okay, fine. Go ahead. But don't expect that the money's going to come with that. So, yeah.
Wow. I appreciate that perspective, Arabian. That's tremendous. And again, this always happens, Zach, where I ask, folks in the industry who have this experience, their perspective on this, and they wind up encapsulating in 100 words what took me like 15 chapters in my Break the Business book. I mean, guy nailed it. That's really terrific. And of course, we're talking to a teacher, right? So of course he knows how to express that point perfectly and succinctly.
And it hurts when somebody takes your money, over and over, and you kind of figure it out and like, you know what? That's not going to happen again.
Oh my gosh. Amen. All right, gentlemen, this has been a real pleasure. We appreciate your being forthright, telling us the real stories. And I've got to tell you, I've really enjoyed learning about Incubate Next as somebody, who works with nonprofit organizations, who is an educator as well. I really admire what you all are doing to support entrepreneurs in underserved communities. I think that's awesome. I really would like to keep that conversation going with you, and anything I can do to help you guys doing what you're doing, I think is awesome. In the meantime, love to give that web address out for everybody again. That's incubatenext.com, and that's incube, INCUB, the number 8, next.com. We want to make sure we get that right and bring people over to your terrific platform. Gentlemen, this has been a treat. Before I let you go, I'd like to ask each of you our final question that we ask all the guests that come on this program. We'll start with you, Paul. Do you have any last tips that you can share with the indie creators out there to help them move their careers forward?
Never give up. I think the one thing that matters the most when it comes to success is persistence. You're going to fall a whole lot of times, and you're going to get up one more time, then you fall and keep on going.
I love it. Love it. Arabian Prince, same question. Any last tips to share with the indie creators out there to help them move their careers forward?
Yeah, I have 3. And the first one's very important, and that is opinions are opinions. Don't let people sway what you do. Now, Zach's over there smiling. I see, right? Don't let people sway your creativity with their opinions, because what's in your brain may be the greatest thing on planet Earth that no one understands. Prince, Michael Jackson, Parliament Funkadelic, Kraftwerk, list goes on and on of amazing people. I'll tell a really, really quick story, and hopefully I have time. But I was with some friends, some real musicians, unlike me, and they were telling me about Miles Davis and Herbie Hancock. And it was just this great story where Herbie Hancock was this fresh new musician just working for Miles Davis, and he didn't know that Miles Davis likes messing with people. And basically, they practice and practice and practice for a show. Right before the show, Miles walks in and goes, "Hey, Herbie, everything we practice, forget about it. All I want you to do is play the black keys." And Herbie's like, "What? What do you mean?" Like, "Don't touch them other keys, man. Just figure it out and play the black keys." And he said that's one of the greatest pieces of information he ever got, because he had to improvise and figure it out. And that's my second thing. Improvise, figure it out. You want to be great, you got to figure it out. You can't be locked in this box of musicianship or, okay, I went and got singing lessons. Any singer I've ever worked with, I'm a good singer. Don't do it, because that's no disrespect to singing teachers, but if you've got something, don't let somebody else ruin it trying to get you to sing like they want you to sing. Be special, be yourself. And then the final point is the one I said in the beginning: take care of your business. And if you don't know, ask somebody, get an attorney, get somebody who does know. YouTube, Instagram, Google, figure it out, and you'll be amazing.
One more time at that website, everybody, you can check out Incubate Next by going to Incube, INCUB, the number 8, next.com. Arabian Prince, Paul Hershenson, thank you so much, both of you, for joining us this week. This has been an absolute treat. Please don't be a stranger. Love to keep the conversation going with you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.
Oh, that was cool.
Dude.
Man, that was great. And Arabian Prince gave us the straight info about, the experience with NWA and getting their money taken from them. That was awesome. Oh,
Dude.
Man, just the perspective from both of them. I love it. Oh.
There is something and I don't know Arabian Prince this is the first time I ever got to speak with him, but I love meeting other artists who I feel like kinship with who do many different things, and I always find that their brains work in very fascinating ways, usually very different than mine, but it's always fascinating to hear them talk. And so when he had his three tips, which by the way, if you really distill them, are all very different but all very equally important, it was just fun to see how he was working through that to give that advice to people who he's really trying to help. And I really appreciate that. The
two of them together those team meetings, those founders meetings must be an absolute blast, because they're both so brilliant and understand the industry so well and just have the right mindset in terms of their sense of mission. I could talk to these guys all day. Yeah. Okay, Zach, now I feel kind of silly, because that was a great interview with two awesome music industry figures. But I told myself that if we had some time this week, I was going to play this video clip for you, because it's been in my head all day, and I'm gonna do it. Okay. So you know how sometimes, Zach, there are certain YouTube memes or like funny YouTube videos that kind of recycle every 6 years or so and find their way back into your life via Twitter, and then you get to fall in love with that same funny video all over again?
I just saw that Charlie Bit My Finger is now an NFT, and so yes, I went back and watched it, and it's still hilarious.
Sold for like 500,000, right?
Yeah, man. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
Man, we're in the wrong business. So this happened to me recently. When I was in law school, a bunch of us got obsessed with this 1980 video that just kept recycling itself on YouTube of famed director Orson Welles doing a commercial for the Paul Masson Wine Company. Okay, and I know the way I pitch it to you, it doesn't sound that interesting, but there's a YouTube video going around of Orson Welles, yes, the Orson Welles of Citizen Kane fame, of outtakes of him doing this commercial for Paul Masson Wine. Now, to set this up a little bit, okay, it's 1980. You might remember Citizen Kane came out like 50 years before that. So this is late in life Orson Welles. This is Orson Welles just getting whatever paycheck he can. Okay, so Lauren, can you pull up the clip for us here? So there he is. There's Orson. Okay. So to set this up for you a little bit, Zach, this video makes me laugh every time. All right. So Orson Welles, allegedly, as the story goes, showed up to this shoot a little drunk, and possibly he took a sleeping pill that he didn't expect to kick in when it did. That's the story. And so before I show this clip, and just to sort of set the scene, in fact, Zach, do me a favor here. Can you tell tell the listeners, for theater of the mind, for those who aren't watching this live stream right now, set the scene. Tell us what you see in this picture.
So on the far left, we have presumably a couple dressed like, I'm guessing, to me, they look like they are people from the 50s dressing what they think people from the 90s would dress like. So very, just take that what you will. But to the right of them is a dude who looks obviously in the tank, sitting at a table with I can't tell if it's a black suit or a tuxedo on, and I can't tell if he is intrigued or about to murder somebody.
Yeah, he's staring deep into your soul.
And there's a bottle of champagne in between them.
And there's like a fancy dinner party, right? So before we play the clip of Orson Welles trying to tell you about this champagne, I'm going to read to you what he's supposed to say at this scene, which is taking place at a fancy dinner party in this commercial. What he's supposed to say is, the French champagne has always been celebrated for its excellence. There is a California champagne by Paul Masson, inspired by that same French excellence. It's fermented in the bottle, and like the best French champagne, it's vintage dated. That's what's on the cue card. So this is take one of Orson Welles attempting that in the condition that I spoke about before. Lauren, play the clip, please.
No, sorry, cut. Yeah, rolling. 102, take 2.
The French champagne has always been celebrated for its excellence. There is a California champagne by Paul Masson, inspired by that same French excellence. It's fermented in the bottle, and like the best French champagne, it's vintage dated. So Paul
Stop right there. Stop right there. But before I play the next take, because he does 2 takes on this. So a couple things to draw out here for the viewers and the listeners. For those who can't see it, the couple that Orson Welles is doing this scene with, we have to agree, Zach, consummate professionals, right?
I'm amazed.
Like, they don't break character next to a just visibly impaired Orson Welles, who you said he's wearing a suit jacket. It might just be like a black blanket that they have around him to keep him warm.
That could be.
Like, it's like a moo-moo on him. I'm not sure what's going on. But like these 2 other actors in this scene, super professional, not breaking character, just ready to play their character. Like, this is their big break. They finally, they're getting to share a screen with Orson Welles. And Orson Welles is just not here. He's just not having this. He's having all sorts of trouble. You can see in the commercial, he's like squinting to try to read the cue cards. But the funniest part of the commercial is the first 3 lines where he's supposed to go, the French champagne has been celebrated for its excellence. And it comes out as, the French. And so there was like a 6-week stretch when I was in law school. I would pass by my friends in the hallway. We'd just go, the French. And we knew exactly what we were talking about.
That was wild. And what was interesting to me is you could tell that the guy is holding the bottle of champagne and he's uncorking it, even though it's like whatever. But you can tell there's a certain beat, like a word he's supposed to actually uncork it at. And he's like, oh my God, where is the rhythm? I don't know where this is going. And so you can see his hands like start to go and then stop and then go again. And the first thing I noticed actually was the woman, when he starts to speak, her for a split second, and this is how you know she's a professional, because she didn't just lose it. Her eyes went, and she's like, back in. You can tell that, I swear nobody had spoken to this man before they started rolling. Like, they sat him down, actors get, okay, we're all blocked in properly. All right, and go. Yeah. And then they went, oh my God, what's happening?
Yeah, they were just like, all right, look, we got 3 minutes tops of Orson Welles lucidity. Get him in the chair. Let's try to get this in the can. We'll try to fix it in post, but if we want him to read this cue card, now is the time.
Yeah, now or never, baby.
Now, Zach Sloan, what if I told you that as great as that first take was, take 2 is even more spectacular?
I want to see it because from what you're telling me, he's gradually he is gradually getting more intoxicated. So I would like to please see
the first thing I want you to notice is how he tries to do the French champagne right in the beginning. Lauren, go ahead and play.
102, take 3.
Action, please.
The French champagne has always been celebrated for its excellence. There is a California champagne by Paul Masson, inspired by that same French excellence. It's fermented in the bottle, and like the best French champagne, it's vintage dated. So
Cut.
Paul Masson.
Imagine being the director.
Wow.
Okay, your actor is Orson Welles by any objective measure, like one of the most legendary actors and directors of our time. Many people would consider Citizen Kane to be the apex of American cinema. Okay. Right. And you have to direct Orson Welles, which must be not unlike, doing choreography for Gregory Hines. It's hard to even fathom, like, having to give this person direction. And imagine the courage that it takes to have to cut Orson Welles halfway through and tell him, you're not doing a good job here, Orson Welles.
Dude. Words escape me. That is
the French.
I'm going to show that to my wife as soon as we get off. I'm gonna be like, baby, check this out. Part of me wonders, did they have to change the pronunciation of the what is it, Paul Masson? Is it actually supposed to be Mason? And they're like, well, it's Masson now because Orson Welles.
You're Masson now, Paul. Orson said so.
We're sorry.
The best thing about this video, and I encourage everybody watching and listening to check this out, is you can also see the final product, the actual commercial that they made out of this. And whatever post-production person worked on this commercial deserves every award that could be possibly bestowed, because that person took that footage, that raw footage that you saw, and turned it into a passable commercial. And it was nothing short of cinematic alchemy. Just, the whole thing's beautiful. Like, this is, telling you, like, every 6 years, this video finds its way on my Twitter timeline, and I fall in love with it all over again.
And now I'm going to be part of that because that was amazing. And all I can say is I've had to
with you.
I've had to edit bad vocal performances together before and like comp together like 30 takes to get a passable vocal performance. I can't imagine adding a visual component to that. That sounds impossible.
It was a lot of ADR. They definitely had to like have him re-record it and then try to lip sync. I'm serious. You watch this. You watch the final product commercial. That's totally what they did. The French. All right. Our thanks to Paul Hershenson and Arabian Prince. Check out their incubator at incubatenext.com, and that is incube, INCUB, the number 8, next.com. My thanks to you, Zach Sloan. This has been an absolute treat, my man. I love doing this show with you.
Dude, thank you for having me on, man. That was... I can't believe I got to speak to Arabian Prince. That's the highlight of my week, and then also get to see that video, which is somehow also... I can't imagine the life I live where I get to talk to one of the founding members of NWA and watch this video, and they're both on the same list somehow. It's very weird.
So well put. And thank you all for checking out Break the Business. We will see you next week.